Talion and Salus spent the next 2 hours poring over all of the countless different seals that were required, the symbols that meant different things. So basically, in order to produce any spell in a solid format, in a seal, Talion would have to visualize and then draw or etch these patterns into the object that he was imbuing the spell into. So in other words, unlike a regular caster, there was an absolute minimum of 8, meaning he had to draw a minimum of 8 symbols on the object. 4 for the 4 steps that the magic has to pass through, and another 4 for the intent, form, storage, and release of that spell. Each one having to have a secondary symbol for how that part of the process was supposed to be fulfilled. And apparently, it actually got more complicated. Once again, unlike a regular caster who simply gets to feel things out and imbue spells with intention and form, where to be stored and whatnot, and how to be released with basic will, which is easy. A seals mage must learn to combine symbols, either overlapping them or drawing multiple, for more complicated feelings, emotions, or intents. For example, there were more complicated spells that didn't simply electrocute an enemy, rather, they would sap away energy or make them ill, make their physical body wither, or things like that. With things like this, the intent, form, release, store, all had to be more complex. And while a regular caster can simply feel them out, which is quick, easy, and doesn't require any knowledge of symbols or patterns, a seals mage has to create a visual representation for that feeling, which requires drawing multiple symbols to connect to that part of the pattern of the seal that they produce. Eventually, Talion managed to beat most of the patterns and symbols into his head, reciting them for his teacher so that he was sure that he knew them very well. It was almost like learning a second language. But surprisingly enough, Talion did it quite effectively, learning very quickly. He used one of the pieces of paper in order to take a permanent note, write down all of the different seals and symbols and what they meant, so that he could study it on his own time. Afterwards, his teacher finally stepped over the patterns that he carved into the ground, standing over Talion. "Okay, kid. I think you've got enough of this beaten into your head that we can actually start beginning to try to create a seal. And now, here's the important part in creating a seal on paper. That ink that you have is special. It's made of substances which are able to absorb demonic magical essence effectively well, and mix together to be a very effective seals use substance. However, it's not complete yet. There's one more thing that you have to add to that." "Something I have to add? I mean, what?" Talion said, picking up the small glass vial of ink and looking it over. "I mean, it looks like ink. I don't know how I'm supposed to make it more inky than it is." It's not making it more inky. It's attuning it to you. Remember, this ink is supposed to be part of the base for which you're using to infuse the magic into a substance, an object. So, in order to make that magic more stable, to make it able to stick, you need to strengthen the ink, which will then strengthen the object that it's imbued into. And not only strengthen it, but make it more stable enough to hold the spell, even over a long period of time. Well, Okay, Talion replied, still looking at the inkwell. But how exactly do I do that? Well, it's simple. You have to put yourself into the jar. Your magical essence passes through your body naturally. Your physical body is naturally attuned to that energy, made to work with it. Or perhaps it's your energy that's made to work with your body. I suppose that's more of a chicken in the egg thing. Regardless, in order to make the ink palatable to your energy, you need to put yourself in it. What? Talion said, with a nervous look on his face as he stared up at his teacher. How am I supposed to put myself into the ink? Exactly? Well, that part is actually simple enough, kid. What you're going to need to do is put some blood into the ink. Blood? Yes, your blood is a powerful conduit for magical energy. Blood in general is a powerful conduit for magical energy. There are countless spells that use pure blood all by itself as a channel for all sorts of magic. The more of it, the better. There's a reason that ink vial is only halfway full. You're going to splice the other half with your blood. Once your blood is thoroughly mixed with the ink, it'll be perfect for imbuing seals to create magic. Oh man, is it always going to be like this? Talion asked, looking at the inkwell and imagining how much blood he was going to have to put into it. The inkwell was small, but for whatever reason, to Talion, it felt like that half empty was just a massive amount. Trust me, kid, you can afford to lose that much blood. You'll be fine. Fine, Talion said as he put down the inkwell, bringing his hand to his mouth and biting down on his thumb a bit. Ow! He shouted after pulling his thumb out, blood now dripping from it. A small amount splattered on the ground around him, in small drops, but Talion quickly moved his thumb over the vial, beginning to allow the blood to drip down inside of it. This so sucks, he said as he slowly began to fill the vial. It took a few minutes to do so, and unfortunately, Talion began to notice that his finger would start to heal after a short time of beginning to bleed, the blood beginning to stop, and he would look to see that the cut on his finger had closed. So he would have to repeat the process. But eventually, Talion filled the jar. Afterwards, his teacher recorked it and then shook the vial vigorously, even taking the cork out and using the quill to stir the ink inside of it, making sure it was very thoroughly mixed in, after which he returned it to Talion. Okay, that should be good. Now you have all the necessary ingredients to begin creating your first seal. Now, to start off with something basic, you're going to produce what is known as a demon bolt. It is a very simple magical spell that gathers a small amount of demonic energy and fires it off in a concentrated state. It's more or less simply condensed demonic energy, but it's simple enough that it shouldn't burn up the paper to do. Even though it falls into the destruction category, it won't be a problem for you. Since, as I said, you're a seals mage, as long as you're imbuing it within a seal, you bypass the actual category of the use of the spell, as it basically becomes seals magic. At that point, his teacher gave him the list of symbols that he needed in order to produce the spell. His teacher went over the process of explaining how to draw a seal, which was actually more complicated than it sounded. He essentially had to draw something of a web of connecting dots within a circle, forming a pattern that would function to the eventual end of the spell, running from the beginning segment, which is intent, all the way to the end, which is release. Confine all of those things within a circle, and then, after it's complete, he could begin imbuing it with magic.